What happens when a royal prince, once adored by the public, walks into a studio expecting applause and walks out a shattered man? What happens when truth, pain, and ego collide under the blinding lights of late-night television? Tonight, you'll witness a takedown so unnerving, so real, it left an audience speechless, and a global icon reeling. This is not just an interview, it's a reckoning. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. If you love watching celebrity facades unravel in real time, this is your channel. Like, share, and let us know in the comments what do you think triggered this royal meltdown. It began like any other late-night show, the studio of late night, with Seth Meyers buzzed with familiar pre-show electricity. Camera operators adjusted their angles, floor producers whispered into headsets, and the band ran final notes. The audience was humming, that contagious, caffeinated hum of anticipation you can only get when the guest is someone different. Tonight's guest wasn't an actor on a promo run, or a musician debuting a new track. It was Prince Harry. Yes, that Prince Harry, the one who had walked away from Buckingham Palace and into Hollywood, Netflix deals, and bombshell interviews. And tonight, he was here supposedly to talk about a new charitable initiative. Supposedly. Backstage, Seth Meyers flipped through cue cards, sipping lukewarm coffee. His monologue was tight, the crowd was hot, and the segment was expected to be smooth. Just another conversation, except, it wasn. Single quotes T. Seth stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, delivered his monologue with razor-sharp timing, and then introduced his guest. And now, please welcome Prince Harry. The audience erupted. Harry stepped out, smiling wide, dressed in a smart blazer that was trying just hard enough. His handshake with Seth was firm, practiced. He looked relaxed, but only on the surface. They settled into the conversation easily. Small talk, polished jokes, the usual celebrity chatter. Harry was charming, as always, dishing out just enough self-deprecation and personal insight to feel human without risking too much. They spoke about life in California, about his nonprofit work, about healing, about media responsibility. It was going exactly as Harry had planned, but Seth hadn't come to just smile and nod. He had read the memoir, he had seen the interviews, he had the quotes, the contradictions, and the questions nobody else dared to ask. The real interview hadn't even started yet, and Harry didn't know it, but the trap was already set. 10 minutes in, Seth pivoted. He leaned in, his tone softened, but his words sharpened. "You know, Harry," he began casually, "I've been following your work on media accountability. It's clear you care deeply about responsible journalism." Harry nodded quickly. "Absolutely. The media has a duty to be truthful and humane." Seth smiled gently. "Of course. And you've been very vocal about how the press treated your family, your wife especially. You've given interviews, filed lawsuits, written a book. Something shifted." Harry's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened. His shoulders squared just a little more rigidly. His left hand flexed on the armrest. "And I guess I'm just curious," Seth continued, "how do you reconcile that passion for privacy with the decision to publish private conversations about your father, your brother, your stepmother?" The studio went silent. So silent, you could hear a lens zoom. Harry didn't flinch, but he blinked. Twice. "I'm sorry," he asked, voice calm. "Could you clarify?" Seth nodded. "Well, you've criticized the media for violating your family's privacy. But then in your own book, you shared stories that, by your own admission, were never meant for public ears. Some might say that's contradictory." That was the first crack. Harry adjusted in his seat, his voice still calm to calm. "Those were my experiences. I have every right to share my truth." Seth didn't push. He just tilted his head. "Of course. But doesn't your family deserve the same courtesy, the same right to privacy? You've demanded for yourself." Harry's fingers curled into fists, subtle but unmistakable. "What I wrote wasn't gossip," he said tightly. "It was context." "For your healing," Seth said gently. "But did they agree to that healing being public?" That was the moment the temperature dropped. Harry's face hardened. "You're twisting this," he said, his voice still, quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. "I came here to talk about my work, not get ambushed by someone who doesn't understand. I understand what you've said, Seth replied, and I'm asking questions about those words. Now Harry was leaning forward, tone rising. You're trying to make me look like a hypocrite. I'm not trying anything, Seth said. I'm asking why you think it's okay for you to share private family moments, but not okay for the press to do the same. Boom. You could feel the tension snap like a guitar string pulled too tight. Harry stared at Seth, eyes narrowed. I was raised in a system that hurt me, he said through clenched teeth. You think you can sit there and judge me? You don't know what it's like. Seth's reply was quiet, almost too soft for the mic. No, but you wrote a book, so we could. And just like that, the energy in the room shifted. The studio audience wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't clapping. They weren't smiling. They were watching eyes wide, jaws slack, as Prince Harry, polished and rehearsed, began to unravel. Asterisk, not from an attack, but from a mirror. This wasn't comedy anymore. This was confrontation. And the man who had come to control the narrative was suddenly, undeniably, losing it. The audience didn't dare move. Not a whisper, not a cough, just stunned silence as the tension between Prince Harry and Seth Meyers turned from awkward to electric. Harry's jaw was tight, his eyes narrowing. You think this is easy for me? He asked, voice strained. You think I wanted to put this out into the world? Seth didn't blink. I think you chose to, and I think choices have consequences. Harry leaned back in his seat, laughing bitterly, not with humor, but disbelief. Consequences? Do you know what I've sacrificed? What I've endured? I didn't choose to be born into that family. I didn't choose the media circus, the protocol, the coldness. I was forced into it, but you did choose to leave, Seth said calmly, and you chose to tell your side. You chose to make private family moments public. You chose this platform. Harry shot him a look, because I was given no choice. No protection, no support. You don't get to question my survival. I'm not questioning your survival, Seth replied, voice even. I'm questioning how many other people got hurt while you fought. For yours, that line landed hard. Harry's fists clenched. You have no idea what it's like to be betrayed by your own blood, to be the scapegoat. To watch your wife nearly driven to the edge by a press machine designed to destroy and... Yet Seth said slowly, you took those family stories, those betrayals, and turned them into content. Into headlines, into Netflix episodes. That's what I'm trying to understand. The camera zoomed in on Harry's face, a mix of fury, confusion, and something else. Something like fear. I needed people to understand, he said, barely. Above a whisper, I needed them to know what it was really like behind those palace gates. But did your father need people to know his private conversations? Seth asked, tilting his head. Did your brother? Did your stepmother? Harry didn't answer, because he couldn't. And then, as if trying to regain control of the room and himself, Harry shifted. You know, Seth, he said, voice rising again, it's easy for you. You sit here in this cozy studio with your jokes and applause. You've never lived with bodyguards, press packs, and centuries of expectations. You don't know what it's like to be groomed for something you never asked for. You're right, Seth replied, nodding. But millions of people grow up in dysfunctional families. Millions have trauma. Most of them don't publish memoirs revealing their father's mental health or their brother's jealousy. Harry's lip curled. I didn't write it for them. I wrote it for me. For healing, your healing, Seth said softly, but at what cost? The question hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. That's when Harry truly began to unravel. You have no idea what I've been through, he hissed. You think I wanted to be in this spotlight? I wanted a quiet life. I left for peace. But peace doesn't usually come with a Netflix deal, Seth said, almost apologetically. Or a best-selling memoir, or a podcast empire. Harry's laugh this time was ugly. So, I'm not allowed to make a living now. Of course you are, Seth answered. But when you criticize the media for making money off your life, while you make millions doing the same, it raises questions. And this, all this, Harry snapped, is exactly why I didn't want to come here. This is why I don't trust the press, twisting everything, turning my story into a gotcha moment. You're the one who told it, Seth said quietly. Silence. The audience was frozen. Every phone was filming. Harry's voice cracked now, just slightly. My father never hugged me when my mother died. Not once, not even at the funeral. Do you understand what that does to a child? And for a moment, the crowd's collective breath softened. You could feel the humanity, the pain, the broken child beneath the grown man's rage. Seth nodded gently. That's heartbreaking, truly. And it deserves compassion. But does that mean it had to be printed on a page for the world to consume? Harry stared at him, visibly trembling. Was a prisoner in that life, he said. Every smile rehearsed, every appearance calculated. The only time I felt real was when I left. Then why keep talking about it? Seth asked. Why not let it go? Because they haven't let go, Harry shouted. They leak stories, spin lies, make me the villain. I had to fight back. I had to reclaim the narrative. Seth leaned forward, not confrontational, just honest, but maybe fighting back by exposing others. Only continues the cycle. Harry's lips moved, but no sound came out. It was the kind of moment you can't script a global figure. Unraveling live on stage, not from attack, not from scandal, but from the undeniable weight of his own contradictions. In the armor, the image of the relatable prince. Was crumbling, not because of what Seth Meyers said, but because of what Harry couldn't say, and the crowd knew it. Everyone watching at home knew it. What happens when a man who's spent years demanding to be understood finally meets someone who actually tries to understand him and finds he can't explain himself? That was the question. Harry stood up again, not out of aggression this time, but desperation. He paced slightly behind the guest chair, one hand running through his hair, the other clenching and unclenching at his side. The air in the studio had shifted completely. Gone was the energy of a typical late-night interview. What was left was a kind of stunned paralysis, the kind that hangs over a car crash, or a long-awaited confrontation decades in the making. Seth remained seated, calmly watching him. Harry, he said gently, you don't have to prove anything to me. But if you want people to understand your story, you do have to be willing to talk about the contradictions. Otherwise, it just looks like you're hiding behind a spotlight. You say you didn't want. I'm not hiding, Harry snapped, turning sharply. I'm standing here, aren't I? Facing the same judgment I've faced my entire life. Then talk to me, Seth said. Not the rehearsed version, not the PR version. Talk to me like a man. Harry stared at him, frozen. And then, slowly, he returned to the chair and sat down again. But something had changed in his posture. His shoulders sagged, his eyes, still burning, now had a sheen of moisture. This wasn't the prince who'd walked in with a media team and a charming smile. This was a man on the edge. You think I wanted to write that book, he muttered. Do you have any idea how much pain I had to dig through? How many nights I didn't sleep? How many panic attacks I had reading the headlines the next morning, wondering if I'd gone too far? Seth didn't answer. He let him speak. They think I did it for money, for revenge. I did it so people would stop asking why I left. I did. It's so they'd finally shut up about how I betrayed my family. I did it so I wouldn't have to explain myself anymore. But here you are, Seth said, almost sympathetically. Explaining yourself again? Harry's voice dropped to a near whisper, because it's never enough. No matter how much I give, how much I confess, how much I bleed on the page, it's never enough. And what about your family? Seth asked. What do they get to say? That hit harder than expected. Harry closed his eyes. They had decades to speak. They had the press in their pocket. They never said anything until I did. And even then, it was through leaks and shadows. Seth's tone sharpened. But isn't that what you're doing now? Speaking from your version of the shadows, while denying them the same light? Harry didn't answer right away. When he did, it was with brutal honesty. I was angry. I still am. The truth sat heavy in the studio. Not PR spin, not charity sound bites. Just raw, unfiltered emotion. I loved them, Harry continued. All of them. My father, my brother, even Camilla, in some strange, complicated way. I wanted us to be something better. I believed we could be. Seth nodded. But they didn't meet you there. No, Harry whispered. They turned their backs. And then I turned mine. The audience was dead silent, hanging on every word. For a moment, even Seth looked uncertain of what to say. But the moment didn't last, because there was still more ground to cover. And Seth knew the next question would either bring redemption or collapse. "Do you regret it?" Seth asked. "The book, the interviews, exposing so much." Harry looked away, then back. "Yes," he said, then and no. Seth tilted his head. "Which is it?" "I regret the pain it caused," Harry said. "I regret that my niece and nephew might grow up reading things about their father I wish they never had to see. I regret that my father's legacy might be stained because I couldn't stay silent." "But," Seth pressed, "but I don't regret telling the truth," Harry said firmly, "because if I didn't, I would have lost myself." There it was. The paradox, the man desperate to break free of a broken system who used the very tools of that system to do it. A victim of the spotlight, who then sold his pain to the highest bidder. Seth leaned forward slightly. "Do you think you've healed?" Harry laughed, not cruelly this time, but hollow. "No, I think healing takes a lifetime. I think I'm still angry, still afraid, still waiting for someone to call and just say, 'We're sorry, we were wrong.'" "And what if that call never comes?" Seth asked. Harry didn't hesitate. "Then I'll keep telling the truth, even if it burns everything down." That was the moment. The moment everyone watching in the studio and at home realized that Prince Harry wasn't looking for resolution. He was looking for release. Even if it cost him everything, Seth sat back in his chair, the weight of the conversation now visible in his eyes. "You know what scares me most, Harry?" he said finally. "Not the things you've said, but the things you haven't. The pain that's still in there. The parts of the story no one, not even you, is ready to face." Harry didn't reply, but his silence was louder than any outburst. This wasn't about PR or book tours or media narratives. This was about a man who'd run from one gilded cage straight into another and was now screaming from behind its bars. And as the segment faded to commercial, the audience didn't clap, because they weren't sure what they had just witnessed. Was it an interview, a confession, a breakdown, or maybe all three? As the cameras resumed rolling after the commercial break, the studio remained eerily subdued. There was no applause, no polite laughter, no reset. Prince Harry had returned to his seat, but the shift in him was palpable. His blazer hung looser now, like armor that no longer fit. The tension in his jaw hadn't eased, and Seth Meyers, he was watching him carefully. Not as a host, but as a witness. The facade had cracked, but no one knew if what remained would hold or collapse entirely. "I want to ask you one more thing," Seth said quietly. Harry didn't answer. He just nodded. Seth's voice was softer now, almost paternal. "When you look back, not as a prince, not as a public figure, but just as a son, a brother, a father, do you think you've created space for reconciliation? Or have you made it impossible?" Harry blinked. The question hit harder than any accusation before. "I don't know," he admitted, after a long pause. "I think about that more than you could possibly imagine. I tell myself there's still time, that one day we'll sit down. No cameras, no lawyers, no press statements, just family." "And if that day never comes?" Seth asked. Harry's shoulders dropped. "Then I'll live with that, because the alternative was pretending everything was okay while it ate me alive." It was the most human he had looked all night. But humanity wasn't enough to erase the damage. Seth shifted gears gently, but deliberately. "You talk a lot about breaking cycles," he said. "That's noble, but cycles don't just break. With exposure, they break with accountability." Harry's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Seth said, "if your father or brother were sitting here, if they shared private stories about you to the world, would you accept it as their truth? Or would you call it betrayal?" Harry was silent. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. "You're asking me to imagine something that would never happen?" he finally said. "Exactly," Seth replied, "because they haven't shared those stories. Not in books, not in interviews. They've stayed silent," Harry snapped, not loudly, but with finality, because they don't have to talk. They have people to talk for them. Palisades, tabloids, the sources close to the family. "Do you know what it's like to be accused of things and never given the space to respond?" Seth held his gaze. "And you felt the best response was to expose everything." Harry's voice rose again, but this time with a raw edge of pain. I felt the best response was to survive, to protect my wife, my children, to show them that silence isn't the only option. There was a shift in Seth's tone, subtle but sharp. And yet, he said slowly, some might say that in protecting your new family, you torched your old one. That did it. Harry stood again, but not with rage, with the exhaustion of someone who had reached the end of his emotional reserves. He paced for a beat, then turned to the audience. I know what people think of me, he said, that I'm whiny, that I'm privileged, that I cashed in my pain and called it activism. He looked back at Seth. You think I don't hear the mockery, the late-night punchlines, the headlines? And yet here you are, Seth replied. Still doing interviews. Harry shook his head. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I want the truth out there. Not the tabloid version, not the palace version, my version. But truth isn't owned, Seth said quietly. It's shared. That line landed. Harry froze, because he knew, in some way, Seth was right. Truth told in isolation can become something else. Truth told without empathy can feel like vengeance, and truth told without permission becomes betrayal. But Seth wasn't done. There's one more thing I want to ask you, he said, and I want you to really think before you answer. His eyes glistened just barely. I believe, he said slowly, that my children will grow up in a world where they're free to love who they love, free to express who they are, free from the suffocating expectations I was born into. Seth nodded. That's beautiful. But will they thank you for burning the bridge that led back to their grandfather, their uncle, their history? Harry's voice cracked. That bridge was already on fire when I walked away. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. There was no applause, no music cue, just silence, and then something unexpected. Seth leaned forward, not as a host, but as a man. I don't hate you, Harry, he said softly, and I don't think you're lying, but I do think you're hurting people. Even if that's not your intention. Harry's face was blank, unreadable. And maybe, Seth continued, the bravest thing left to do isn't telling your truth, it's listening to theirs. For a second, it seemed like Harry might respond. He opened his mouth, closed it, then stood up one last time. But this time, he didn't storm out. He walked to the edge of the stage, turned to the audience, and simply said, thank you for listening. Then he walked off. No handlers, no security, just a man walking. Away from the spotlight, uncertain if he'd ever want to return, Seth watched him go, then turned to the camera. Well, he said with a quiet breath, that was a conversation. He didn't need to say more. The audience already knew. They had witnessed something real. Messy, contradictory, painful, and the screen faded to black. A question lingered in the minds of every viewer. Was this the beginning of healing, or the final fracture of a royal legacy? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Moments like this one, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, because we're just getting started.